Well, good morning, church. Man, it's good to see you guys today. I hope you're happy to be here. Would you stand? Come on, let's sing together. Wanting a place to hide this weary soul, this bag of bones. I try with all my might, but I just can't win the fight. I'm slowly drifting, a vagabond. Come on. And just when I ran out of road, I met a man I didn't know, and he told me that I was not alone. He picked me up, turned me around, and placed my feet on solid ground. I thank the Master, I thank the Savior, because you healed my heart, you changed my name, forever free. I'm not the same. I thank the Master, I thank the Savior, I thank God. All right, come on, wake up a little bit. Let's go. I cannot deny what I've seen. Got no choice but to believe. My doubts were burning like ashes in the wind. So long to my old friends, burden and bitterness. You can just keep it moving. Nah, you ain't welcome here. From now to when the streets are gold, I'll sing of how you saved my soul. This wayward son has found his way back home. You picked me up, turned me around, you placed my feet on solid ground. I thank the Master, I thank the Savior, because you healed my heart, changed my name, forever free. I'm not the same. I thank the Master, I thank the Savior, I thank God. Oh, I thank God. Oh, I thank God. Come on, I love this part. We go. Hell lost another one. I am free. Oh, I am free. Yeah, I am free. And hell lost another one. I am free. Yeah, I am free. Oh, I am free. Hell lost another one. Can we sing? I am free. Hell lost another one. I am free. Oh, I am free. Oh, hell lost another one. I am free. Yeah, I am free. Oh,
Sinners' chains breaking free, miracles still happening. Waters part, I see mountains move. No other name carries the power to save. It crushes the power of the grave. But Jesus,
Thank you for worshiping with us. You can take your seats.
What is up, Believers Church? Hey, what's up? My name is Doug, and that was camp that we went to just a couple weeks ago. And as you can see, it was such an incredible weekend. Students had a chance to have a good time, build lasting relationships, and we had a bunch of students make first-time decisions to follow Jesus. So it truly was a life-changing week. And the decisions that they made and the relationships that they made, they weren't just camp decisions, they're things that carry on after camp. Those decisions are impacting their lives even right now. Those relationships are ones that they rely on even now that camp is over. So it really is this decision that has impacted their eternity. So camp is worth it. So we wanted to show you a video so you can get hyped with us. And cool news, right? We are actually leaving tomorrow for the next camp. I'm going to Believers Kids Camp tomorrow morning. And we are praying for just as much fun, just as much relationship building, and just as much life change. So we want you to pray with us, and we can't wait to get back to share all the amazing things that are going to happen even this week as well. So get excited with us. It's going to be so much fun. For today, though, I would love for you real quick, if you don't have it already, to check out the QR code in the seats in front or behind you. If you scan that with your smart device, it'll take you to our homepage where you can check out the Believers app and some of the details for today's service as well. Here you can find things like message notes, you can find our communication card, and some really exciting things happening at the church over the summer. So if you don't have it already, please check it out and go ahead and download it today. If you're a first-time guest with us today, we are so glad you're here, and we have something just for you. If you fill out the communication card, we would love to follow up with you and talk about who we are as a church. And as you leave, if you swing by the guest services central area in the Commons, we have a coupon for free duck donuts, which are the best donuts in the entire world. So if you want a donut today, swing by there if you're a first-time guest, and we just want to celebrate you being here with us today. We're in a series right now called the Summer Concert Series, and every week in this series, we worship together, and then we play a song that leads into the message. The song is always themed around the same thing that the message is themed around. And today, we're talking about the afterlife. We're talking about what heaven is like. Now, what we know right now is relationships matter to us here, but they also matter to us as we step into eternity. So today, we hope that you will enjoy this song and join us in this conversation as we talk about heaven. Enjoy.
Good morning, everybody. It's good to see you. My name is Jamie, and believe it or not, I am one of the pastors here. A few weeks ago, we do this thing called Discovery Experience. It's for those who are relatively new here, and if you are relatively new here, it's this 4-week experience. It will kick off again in September, so you can be looking for that. That's the place for you to really get started around here. But the Discovery Experience starts with a free lunch with me. And so I sat down with someone who'd only been coming to Believers for a few weeks at that time, and they'd never heard me teach. And they asked me, they said, are you the senior pastor? And the way the question was asked was like a mixture of a question and disappointment. And I was like, yeah, that's, you wouldn't know it based on my teaching schedule this summer, but I am that guy. So I assure all of you, I am working. I've been here all summer. I just haven't been teaching all that much. It's been good to get out of the kind of weekly grind of message prep and to work on the fall and other things that we have going on. So, and I'll just say, like, as a church, we are so blessed with the teaching that we have here. Isn't it? It's so true, isn't it? The series started with Pastor Doug, and I say this all the time, but he's just one of my absolute favorite teachers, and I mean that sincerely. Like, I can listen to just about anybody. I love listening to Doug. And then Heather taught a couple of times, and you should be praying for Heather, because in addition to all of the responsibilities that she has around here at the church, she's also practically a full-time Bible college student, and we are reaping the benefits of that. So very grateful for her. And then Pastor Tyler, having him in the mix has been just so good. And I'm just very, very grateful for all the great teaching that we have here. So today I have the privilege of wrapping up the summer concert series, and we're wrapping it up with a summer concert, which is super exciting. So tonight, 6 o'clock, rain or shine. So if it's raining, we'll move it inside. But we have Jeffrey Lewis Polson will be doing the music for us for our concert. And if you don't know, you should. Some of you do know who he is, and you should have just cheered raucously when I said his name. I'm super excited. This year I saw Jimmy Buffett in concert. I saw Stryper in concert. Believe it or not, I did. They were in Charlotte and did a road trip to catch Stryper in concert. That was really good. I saw the Marcus King Band in concert. That was an amazing show. And now I'm going to cap off my whole summer with Jeffrey Lewis Polson. So I hope that you will be here tonight. Bring some friends, just kind of hang out, food trucks, all that kind of stuff. It'll be a lot of fun. Next week, we're starting a new series, and it's a really important series. It's called Identity Theft, and we're going to be talking, speaking into kind of the cultural moment that we're in right now, where everyone seems to be finding their sense of identity and worth and purpose in all kinds of things. But as followers of Jesus, our identity is really tied to the person of Jesus, first and foremost, above anything else. And we're going to be talking about the implications of that starting next week. So I hope you will be here for that. The final topic of the series, as Doug said earlier, is the afterlife. A few weeks ago, I was working on getting my thoughts together for where I was going to go with the message today, and I really had no idea. So I thought, one of the easiest things to do would be just to solicit questions from everybody. So in the Outlet article, if you don't know what that is, I don't have time to tell you. It's something that I do every week, just about. So in that article, I said, I'm going to be teaching on the afterlife. If you have questions about the afterlife, send them to me. And man, there are more than a few people who read it, apparently, because I got inundated with questions, really good questions. And as I started kind of putting my thoughts together for this message, I quickly realized I'm probably not going to answer any of those questions, or maybe only a couple. So that means tomorrow in the Made for Mondays podcast, I will be answering most of those questions. There's so many that it might take a couple of podcasts to work them all in. But if you don't already subscribe to the Made for Mondays podcast, you should. It drops almost every Monday, and it's typically just a deeper dive on the topic that we have on Sunday. And I know you don't need another thing to do or more content to consume, but you can listen to the podcast, while you're working out, while you're driving to work, or as my brother tells me, he listens to it while he falls asleep. So there's a ringing endorsement. He literally told me, he said, it's like sitting in a room with like all of my friends and they're just talking and I drift off to sleep. And I was like, okay, well, that's great. At least it counts as a download. That's the thing. So that's good. So the afterlife. What happens after I die? It's a topic with universal appeal because we all die. It's been estimated that there have been 109 billion people who have lived in world history. 109 billion people. And all but 7 billion of them have died. And the 7 billion who haven't died, that's us. We haven't died yet. But if we just look at the track record of everyone, we know with pretty good certainty we're going to be among those who have died before us, right? We're all kind of marching in that direction. And then what? And what happens? That's the question that we're looking at today. It's interesting to me that in our culture, we have become increasingly irreligious. We've dismissed Jesus as irrelevant. We've kind of chalked up the teachings of Jesus as not current or out of touch or whatever. And at the same time, while we've pushed Jesus to the side, songs like the one that we just heard by Pearl Jam, there are ideas in our culture around heaven and the afterlife that are absolutely everywhere. So there's this paradox where we're increasingly less religious, and yet we still have lots of ideas about what happens to us after we die and what the afterlife is like. In 2021, Pew Research did a survey on America's view of the afterlife, and what they found was kind of interesting. 73% of Americans believe in some form of the afterlife, 73% of us. I find that number to be really incredible. Even 3% of people who claim to be atheists believe in heaven, which that's a little confusing. We don't believe in God, and yet we have this really, we have more agreement around there's a heaven in our country than we do just about any other topic under the sun. Like, we can't agree on anything, but 73% of us believe that there's a heaven. 62% of Americans believe that there is a hell. So isn't that kind of interesting to you? Like, we're increasingly not religious people, and yet we have very strong opinions about the afterlife. And so, we go through a loss, and we all have over the last few years. I don't know anyone who hasn't been touched by loss. And we go through a loss, and then, what our culture says about the afterlife, about heaven, starts to work its way into what we think about. Well, there's a heaven, so the person I lost went there, so I need to be good, because that's apparently how you get to heaven. That's what the song says, anyway. And how you get to heaven, that's where the national unity kind of breaks down. So 73% of Americans believe that there is a heaven, but there's almost no agreement on how one gets there. Nearly 40% of the respondents in that Pew Research poll said that you don't even have to believe in God in order to get into heaven. 40% don't even think God is a necessary part of the afterlife equation. Sam Harris, he's a philosopher, he's an author, he's a critic of everything Christian. And his theory on heaven and the afterlife is that there's this universal problem: everybody dies, and religion swept into the void to address a problem. The problem being death, the problem being lack of meaning to life. We just go through life and then we die. And so religion came in and made up this idea of the afterlife and of heaven. And Harris says that religion doing that has actually caused damage, because our culture, we don't grieve our losses. That part's actually true. We don't grieve our losses. And he says it's because why grieve a loss when you're going to see somebody again in the make-believe land of heaven? That's what Harris says. It's not what I'm saying. That's what he believes. Nearly 1/3 of Americans have a different view of the afterlife. They believe that instead of going to heaven after you die, you reappear in another form of life, just reincarnation. And so, you keep on going, but the result's the same. The end of life isn't really the end of life. And to that idea of reincarnation, Albert Einstein, he described himself as an agnostic. He also described himself as a religious non-believer. That's an interesting way to describe yourself. A religious non-believer. He said, one life is enough for me. And I agree with that, but that doesn't make it right. In fact, sometimes I feel like one life is more than enough for me. So what are we to think of the afterlife? Is it just a made-up story to make us feel good about, our mortality? Is the whole idea, the whole concept of heaven just this make-believe thing? And we clamor for knowledge about the afterlife. Is that why, we, regardless of your religious persuasion, when there are, near-death experiences, that people are drawn to that like crazy? There's this incredible fascination with people who have died or almost died, and they saw something on the other side, and they saw loved ones, and they saw a light, and they felt peace. And are we drawn to those stories just because they make us feel better and they make us feel like, at least there's something more beyond the 80 years, and then it's, if we get that many, and then it's all over? Is that why we're drawn to that? And that's probably why, 3/4 of Americans believe in the afterlife of some kind, because the thought that this is all there is, that's a little depressing. Bill Nye, Bill Nye, the science guy, he's also an atheist. He's a naturalist. He doesn't believe in God. He doesn't believe in the supernatural. He doesn't believe in the afterlife. And here's what he said in an interview that I watched with him and a handful of others about the afterlife. He said, watching ourselves die is to me overwhelming evidence that there is no life after death. There doesn't seem to be any reason to think that when you die, you go back to your optimum age, at your optimum athletic ability, in your optimum intellectual sharpness. And the reason he's saying that is because when we think of the afterlife, we tend to think of ourselves as, like 30, right? At our very best. And then he went on to say, he said, evolution, if it were an entity, doesn't really care about you. He said it this way: it doesn't really care about you, man. You had your kids, your genes have been passed on, and then you expire. You lose your faculties as you run out of steam, and that's just how it is. Yeah, man, that's a bummer, right? But that's how an increasing number of people in our country think about the afterlife. This division in our culture is kind of interesting. We're less religious than ever, yet we still have a pretty solid belief in the afterlife, except there is one category in that Pew Research of people who were surveyed about their beliefs about the afterlife, and the nuns. You remember the nuns because I talk about them a lot. The nuns are those on a religious survey. They would check the block. None of the above. They have no religious affiliation. They're the younger generations typically. We talked about this in the What in the World series that we did a while back. If you want to dig in a little bit deeper, you can go to our YouTube channel and find that. It's pretty fascinating what's happening in our country, and it is largely generational, although it's not exclusively generational. And the nuns, they're a growing segment of our population, and 50% of the nuns don't believe in the afterlife. So while 73% of us collectively do, only 50% of the nuns do. And as we move forward and that population tends to grow, that's where we're headed culturally. Increasingly, that will be, in just a matter of time, maybe even as soon as 10 years from now, that'll be the majority thought in our nation, that there is no such thing as an afterlife. And these growing group of cynics, these naturalists, they see themselves having outgrown the superstition of religious myth. And maybe you're here and you fit into that same camp. You just find it hard to believe. You don't have room in your worldview for the supernatural. So we might think that these divisions about the afterlife are new to our time. Like things are changing so rapidly, and we're experiencing all of these different ideas around what the afterlife is. And you might draw the conclusion that, like there was a solid belief around the afterlife at one point in time, and now we've kind of gradually gone to this place where now there's all these other views. But that's not true. There's always been this wide disparity of thought and belief around what happens in the afterlife. And get this, there was even disparity of thought within Judaism around the afterlife. And I want to take you to Matthew's gospel account. So in the New Testament, the New Testament starts with the book of Matthew. He's one of the disciples of Jesus. If you want to go to Matthew 22, you can do that in the Believers Church app. The QR codes are on the chairs. If you don't have that app, you can get there and follow the notes. There are hard copies of notes at the doors if you want to grab those. If you want to grab a Bible, there are Bibles around the auditorium that you can use. You can go to Matthew 22. And if you don't have a Bible of your own that's easy to read and understand, you can take that one home with you. We use the New Living Translation primarily around here. In Matthew 22, there were two different groups that we read about. Starting in verse 15, there's the Pharisees. And the Pharisees, we learn in Matthew 22, are trying to trip Jesus up around a conversation around taxes. So the Pharisees, Israel was an occupied nation, you know this. They were occupied by the Romans, so they had to pay taxes to their occupiers, which obviously would not be a very popular thing, but it was, they didn't care if it was popular. They were using it to leverage something against Jesus. They wanted Jesus to say something against Caesar, against Rome. And so the Pharisees tried to trip up Jesus. Now, the Pharisees were a religious sect, a part of Judaism. They were theologically very conservative. They knew the law of Moses very well. They followed the law of Moses very strictly. And they were rules-oriented. They followed the rules of the faith. And in verse 23, you see a different group that are called Sadducees. And they're another sect of Judaism, kind of the other extreme within Judaism. So we get introduced to them, and Matthew tells us that same day, the same day that the Pharisees tried to trip up Jesus, that same day Jesus was approached by some Sadducees, religious leaders who say there is no resurrection from the dead. And as you go through the New Testament, you read more about the Pharisees than you do the Sadducees, but we learn a little something about the Sadducees here. So they were also a sect of Judaism. They would be a little more progressive, well, a lot more progressive than the Pharisees. They didn't believe, as you see here, they didn't believe in the afterlife. They didn't really believe even so much in a spiritual. They only believed in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. So they didn't believe in the scrolls of Ezekiel, Daniel, Isaiah. They didn't believe in a coming kingdom of God. And they had no real belief in an afterlife. And in fact, in the book of Acts, Luke tells us just a little bit more. He says, the Sadducees say there is no resurrection or angels or spirits. But the Pharisees believed in all of those. So you have these two different sects within Judaism. So that's kind of interesting. That's a pretty narrow field. And there were some who believed in an afterlife. There were some who did not believe in the afterlife. I was listening to a message by Pastor Tim Keller, and he was talking about these two groups in a different context, but it was kind of interesting, and I'll just share it. It's just kind of a sidebar. But he said, like, if you think about it in these terms, the Pharisees were out to get Jesus, and the Pharisees would be what we would call conservatives or the right? So that would be the Pharisees. The Sadducees, more progressive, more left-leaning, they would be the liberals. They were more liberally applying, interpreting Scripture. And yet both of these groups, the right and the left, were opposed to Jesus. And Keller's observation I thought was really good for our time. And he said, it's still true today. It doesn't matter if you're on the right or on the left. There's this, you would think that they would line up differently with Jesus, but they don't. And today it's still true. The right tries to claim Jesus as their own. The left claims Jesus as their own. And if you think Jesus fits neatly in your right or in your left, you probably don't understand Jesus as well as you think you do. This is a pretty interesting observation. If you want to know where we stand on politics and all that kind of stuff, the last time I taught here, and I thought maybe it was going to be the last time I ever taught here, was July 3rd. And I taught on politics. So if you want to check that out on our YouTube channel, go ahead and do that. So back to Matthew 22. The Sadducees, they posed this question. Teacher, Moses said, and try to track with this question, if a man dies without children, his brother should marry the widow and have a child who will carry on the brother's name. Well, suppose there were 7 brothers. The oldest one married and then died without children, so his brother married the widow. But the second brother also died. And then the third brother married her. And this continued with all 7 of them. And last of all, the woman also died. So tell us, whose wife will she be in the resurrection? For all 7 were married to her. Now remember, the Sadducees don't even believe in an afterlife. So this question is not even a legit question. The purpose of this question is to make the teaching of the afterlife look absurd and to make Jesus look absurd if he tries to wade in to answer this question. Well, he'll be married to the third one because they were married the longest or whatever. Like if Jesus starts wading into that, he's going to look kind of silly. And so that's the whole purpose of this question. Now, the pretense of the question, though, while really, really strange to us, would have been familiar to those listening to Jesus teach that day. Because there was this provision in the law of Moses that provided for a widow to marry the next one in line. And if I were the next one in line, I'd be like, man, this is not going to end well for me. They're all dead. But the practice is known as levirate marriage. Levirate marriage. And it was a provision in the law of Moses to provide for the most vulnerable of that society, which would have been a widow. A woman by herself would have had a very difficult time surviving. And so it was really a compassionate provision that was included in the law of Moses to make sure that people like widows wouldn't fall through the cracks. And so the question is, who will she be married to in the afterlife? Of all the questions that I received from you, that was the question that I got asked probably the most. Not, hey, I've been married 5 times. Which one am I going to be married to in the afterlife? That would be awkward. But no, the question was, will I know my wife? Will I know my husband? Will I know my dad in the afterlife? Will I still be married? Will I know my spouse? Will I know other people? So what does Jesus say in response to this question? The first thing that Jesus says is not really responding to the question. Jesus replied and he said, your mistake is, so he just calls them out, like, dumb question. You know how they say, the only question, there are no dumb questions, or the only question never asked is, I can't remember how that goes. But, there are no dumb questions. That's supposed to make you safe to ask anything. And basically, Jesus says, that's a dumb question. Your mistake is you don't know the scriptures and you don't know the power of God. And he's talking to religious leaders. And they knew the scriptures. And what's interesting about the scriptures, the Bible, is the Bible, we often think of it as it's the Word of God. That's what it's called. And it is a revelation of the Word of God. But it's also a revelation of God himself. And what Jesus says to them is, you don't know the Word of God, and you don't know the power of God. Like you're clueless, is basically what he's saying to them. And then he delves in verse 30. He says, for when the dead rise, they will neither marry nor be given in marriage, and in this respect, they will be like the angels in heaven. A couple of things here. First of all, when the dead rise. So Jesus declares emphatically there is a resurrection. There is an afterlife. Jesus speaks very definitively about it. There will be a resurrection. There won't be marriage. Are any of you excited about that? If you're married, don't say it out loud. If you are, does that sound exciting to you? No marriage, no passion, no love, no sex. I'll come back to that in just a little bit. Verse 31, Jesus says, but now as to whether there will be a resurrection of the dead. Haven't you ever read about this in the scriptures? Long after Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had died, in fact, a couple centuries after they had died, God said, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. So he is the God of the living, not the dead. So in this answer, Jesus gives us two insights into the afterlife that I want to address rather quickly. The first one is this question here. Why? Why is there an afterlife? And the answer to this is probably going to be a little surprising to you. Jesus refers back to Exodus chapter 3. And God is speaking to Moses from a burning bush. And Moses asks who is speaking to him. And in response, God says, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He didn't say I was the God of Abraham. And like I said, Abraham had been dead at that point a couple hundred years. And yet he refers to Abraham in the present tense, which is significant. It would make no sense if Abraham was no more. And this is what's significant about this response that God gave, is God entered into a covenant relationship with Abraham, this promise that he agreed to with Abraham. And then he repeated that covenant promise again to Isaac and Jacob. And the promise of God, this is why there is an afterlife, the promise of God never ends. God is eternal, and his covenant promise to them is also eternal. Think about this. The eternal God enters into a relationship with us, and our relationship with God endures like God himself. So without an afterlife, the mission of Jesus makes no sense at all. So God comes to earth and puts on flesh and walks among us and endures the cruelty of the cross, and he dies for what? So we could invite Jesus into our heart for 30 or 40 years? Like, that doesn't make any sense at all. No, his love for you knows no end. I often hear people, I think it's kind of common right now for people to say, I love you to the moon and back, and that's supposed to be like a lot. That's nothing compared to how much God loves you. He loves you to all eternity. This is what the Apostle Paul was getting at, I think, in Romans chapter 8, when he says this, can anything ever separate us from Christ's love? Anything at all? Does it mean he no longer loves us if we have trouble? Any of you have trouble? Do you think that means God doesn't love you? Does it mean he no longer loves us if we have trouble or calamity, if we're persecuted or hungry or destitute or in danger or threatened with death? No, despite all these things, overwhelming victory is ours through Christ who loved us. And I am convinced, Paul says, that nothing will ever separate us from God's love. Ever. Neither death, nor life, nor angels, demons, fears for today, worries about tomorrow, not even the powers of hell can separate us from God's love. You were created to be in an eternal relationship with God the Father. I think some people miss the point. Your relationship with God matters not just to get you to heaven, but there's this relationship that you begin with him right now. And you walk through this life with him now. And if you have this sense that I'm going to go into the afterlife and be with God forever, you need to understand that if you establish a relationship with him right now in the present, he is with you now just as much as you will be with him then. He wants to walk with you through the calamities, through the problems, through the troubles, right here, right now. I think a lot of us are living with the hope of heaven, which is awesome, but with no sense of he is with you now. And he is with you now. What's the purpose of heaven? It's to continue the relationship that you have with God right now. And so a good question to ask yourself is, what is your relationship with God? Do you have one now? Because it will impact then. Next question that Jesus addresses in his response is this one here. What is the character of the afterlife? What's it like? What's it going to be like? And when you read that people aren't given to marriage in heaven, you're either, relieved or disappointed. But both of those responses miss the point entirely. Jesus isn't saying that, we're all just going to, be friends in heaven. Maybe I'm the only one, but in my dating life, which didn't last very long because I got married super young. I was 20 when I got married. So my dating life was pretty short. But the amount of times I heard someone say, "Can we just be friends?" was a lot. And it's typically not good, right? So is that what heaven is, where we're all just friends? No, heaven is going to be a place where we experience love at its absolute highest level. All things in heaven will operate according to the love of Christ, where love, the same kind of love that God has for you, you are able to experience completely. And up until this point, none of us really have. We will love him and others perfectly as designed by God and almost never experienced by us. The highest expression of love that we have in our culture, what is it? The highest expression of love. It's marriage, right? The highest expression that we have of love is marriage. When a man and a woman commit themselves to a lifetime together with one another. That's the highest expression of love that we have. And can you agree with me that that's the highest expression of love that we have, but we're not doing a very good job of it? Bonnie and I just celebrated 34 years of marriage on July 9th. And yeah, we made it. 34 years. But they haven't been easy years. There's been heartache. There's been brokenness. There's been strife. There's been distance. And of course, there's been forgiveness and joy and blessing too. But my point is, even our highest relationship model that we have to experience love isn't super great. It's just a dim, extraordinarily dim flicker of the love of God. The love that God designed us to experience. And the best we have comes up way, way short. So in Ephesians 5, Paul talks about the purpose of marriage, and he says this. He says, as the scriptures say, a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. This is a great mystery, but it is an illustration of the way Christ and the church being us, the called out ones, the way the church and Christ are one. See, the point of marriage is to give people a glimpse of what the love of Jesus actually is. Heaven will be the fulfillment of love. It will be everything that we've hoped for in our earthly relationships, but that we haven't quite gotten there. Like we know we're kind of coming up short, and in heaven, no longer will we come up short. Jesus is the groom. We, the church, those of us who have a relationship with Jesus, we are the bride, and we will live in this perfect community with him and with each other. And Jesus didn't just, talk about the afterlife. He didn't just put a carrot out there for us. He led the way to the afterlife. Jesus attended a funeral of a friend of his, Lazarus. And when Jesus met the sister of Lazarus, Martha, he said to her, your brother will rise again, affirming the afterlife. And in response, Martha said this, yes, he will rise. When everyone else rises, at the last day, yes, there will be a resurrection on that last day. Yes, you will if you are part of the church. And I don't mean a member of a church. I mean in relationship with Jesus. You will experience a resurrection one day. But listen to what Jesus says in response to that. He said, Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live, even after dying. Everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never, ever die. And I love this. He ends with a question. Do you believe this, Martha? And I think he's asking you the same thing. Do you believe this? Anyone who believes in me, Jesus says, will not die. Do you believe this? So what do we do with this? How does this understanding shape us, impact us? And I want to talk to you just real briefly about this, and you can go over to the communication card, and I want to talk about some steps that you could take as a result. The first one is the most obvious one, and that is follow Jesus. Believe in Jesus. Trust in him. The key to the afterlife is found in the life, Jesus. Do you believe? Paul said in Romans, whoever calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Whoever. It's an open invitation to anybody, including you, no matter what you've done. Do you believe? Jesus asks. Then start following him. I'll give you an opportunity to start that relationship in a moment. We'll pray together, but really, it's not about praying a prayer. It's about following Jesus. And here's my invitation to you. If you pray with me to begin a relationship with Jesus, that's fantastic, but don't stop with that. Please let us know that you've taken that decision, that you've made that decision. You can do that right there in the communication card. Put your mailing address in there, And I promise you this, if you know how socially awkward I am, you know this is true. I will not show up at your house, but I will mail you something. And it's a book that we've put together that just talks about what you can do to actually follow Jesus. And I would like more than anything else to get that in your hands. And that's how that happens. Let me know you've made that decision. Number 2, memorizing those last couple of verses that we looked at where Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Man, commit that to memory, because that will give you an eternal perspective, which brings me to the third next step. If you're going to live forever, how is that going to impact what you're doing right now? How big is the kingdom that you're going to build for you that's going to wash away in a few years? How much of your time are you going to invest in you when there are people all around you who haven't experienced life? Like, invest some of your time, some of your energy, some of your resources into living for eternity. Because I'm telling you, living for Eden right now, trying to get back, claw back some of the comforts of the last, previous few years prior to the chaos, it's gonna come up short. You will live forever if you trust in Jesus. So live like you're gonna live forever. Last one. Who can you invest in and point others to life in Jesus? And tonight would be a great opportunity, by the way, just to come hang out, listen to good music, encounter some other people from believers, and just expose them to the idea that we're not some weird cult. Like normal people, that maybe they can come back and learn just a little bit more about what it means and what we're talking about to be in relationship with Jesus. Whatever your next step is, I hope you'll let me know that in the communication card. And I'd like to close out our time in a word of prayer. Father God, thank you so very much for your love. I'm so grateful for the Gospels that include so much of what Jesus taught. The things that we need to know are the things that have been preserved for us, and we're so very grateful. And Father, I'm grateful for the promise of Jesus, that there is more to this life than just the here and now, just the present. Boy, that gives me great encouragement. And I thank you for it. I thank you, Father, that you sent Jesus to model life. And I pray for my church family. I pray that we, all of us, myself included, that we would live our lives in view of eternity. That we would not be so short-sighted, making decisions that in light of eternity don't seem very consequential or seem really destructive. So thank you for the promise of eternal life. And if you're here outside of faith in Jesus, I can assure you that collectively we are praying for you right now, that you would make a decision to say yes to following him. And if that's you, you can just pray with me and say, Jesus, I do believe in you. I do believe that you are the resurrection and the life. I believe you are who you claim to be. I believe that if I follow you, I will be with you forever. And so I begin my journey right here, right now, in trusting you. Trusting you to cleanse me of sin, to make me whole and new, to put me on a path towards you, towards life. And Father, we're so very grateful for your Son. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Jamie, thank you for that really important talk today. I know, I love that third next step that we had for all of us to follow, to live as if we have this eternity mindset, to allow the idea of eternity to change us right now. So I know as we process that and follow that this week, it's going to be so life-giving for many of us and for the people that we interact with as well. In this moment, too, we're going to receive the offering, and it's a way to worship by giving. So now, if you could, prepare your offering and your tithe. A tithe is simply saying that 10% of what we earn goes back to God, and it helps us as a church to make a difference in our community. And I'm going to brag about camp one more time. Last time, I promise. As we were preparing for camp, we had a few families who told us it was difficult for them to cover the cost of camp. It is an expensive event. And we were looking at budgets, and it was an amazing opportunity to call these families and say, hey, we can come alongside you and we can help fund camp for you. And I know those words were such a joy for them to hear, like, my students can go to camp, and it was a time to celebrate, but it was also a joy to be able to say that as a church, we can come alongside you and we can fund camp, and we want your students to go. And all of that was possible because of your offering, because of your tithe, and because of your generosity. So today, please know that as we give, it is making a difference. It's making an impact on our families and for the coming generation, and it's helping them understand who Jesus is. There are so many ways that you can give today. One of them is through our website, believerschurch.org. There's a tab on there, and you can give through there. Also, if you click on the support tab in the Believers app, it's very easy and secure and a safe way to give. And as you leave today, you can drop it off in the boxes at either door as you walk through them. Thank you so much for your generosity, and please know that we are so excited about camp coming up this week too. Be prayerful. Also, like Jamie mentioned, we have a concert happening today, rain or shine, so please be here. It's going to be an amazing opportunity to be a community that shows love and support to others. And with that, everybody, we are dismissed. Let's go change the world.